When we make these videos, we never cease to be amazed by the amount of history hidden right underneath our feet. We're heading now towards the port city of Southampton, and to try and tell the story of its abandoned tunnel, and to try and uncover its 220-year mystery. The story itself is one of determination, it's one of greed, it's one of incompetence, it's one of Southampton trying to put itself on the industrial map of Great Britain. And the mystery that still remains to this day: did this ill-fated tunnel actually make both ends meet? In the late 1700s, a new type of transportation was gripping the nation. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and a new mode of transport was required. The canal offered the perfect solution to carrying these heavy goods that the Industrial Revolution was producing. A fully laden barge could carry in excess of 30 tonnes. By 1761, the first man-made canal was built, and within 30 years, every investor worth his salt was investing in canal mania. Whilst many of these early canals were connecting various parts of the industrial north and the Midlands, there was some activity here in the south. This here is the Southampton and Salisbury Canal. It's the abandoned Southampton and Salisbury Canal, and forms an integral part of today's story. And so to Southampton. In a very popular meeting held here at the Star, nearly 100 people agreed to invest in the building of a canal between Southampton and Salisbury. The goal being that the canal would ultimately link up with Bristol in one direction and utilise the Itchen in the other to get up to London. This period offered much promise for Southampton's prosperity. In 1795, the construction of this canal started. It would include 2 canal tunnels, the most significant of which was right underneath this part of Southampton City. That would include this corner of the Civic Centre, right across to the eastern side of Palmerston Park. Now, for those of you that know the area, you'll know that it sounds very similar to the existing railway tunnel, and you wouldn't be far wrong. The canal had exactly the same issue of burying itself under the town as the railway, albeit 50 years before. So just down there by those 2 white bands, we think is the location of the western portal of the canal tunnel. Thomas Jenkins had worked for a couple of years on the project before he started reporting problems of water ingress in the tunnel itself. The shareholders called in prominent engineer John Rennie. John Rennie was in the area working on the Kennet and Avon Canal and a few other projects, and he made some damning reports about the tunnel itself, not only the construction but also the quality of the bricks. Further progress was made by 1798, but it wasn't enough, and the shareholders pulled their funds. Thomas Jenkins couldn't afford to carry on. George Jones was appointed as a new contractor, but he too was bankrupt by 1802. For a brief moment, we thought that might mark the site of the western portal of the old canal tunnel, but we think it's about 50 yards further on this way. So by 1821, what was left of this part of the canal, right the way down to Redwood, was nothing more than a dump site, completely abandoned. What remains under the town today, what remains of the canal tunnel, are still there. So to talk about this a little bit further, let's head on to Canal View, which marks the point of the eastern portal just in Palmerston Park. So we're here now at the eastern end of Palmerston Park, and what we believe to be the section leading up to the eastern portal. Once it was abandoned, this then became a short street, fittingly called Canal View. And if we pan the camera around just over here, we believe the little outcrop there by the tree is what would have been the eastern portal, the actual entrance to the canal tunnel that would have headed right under the town. So the canal tunnel under this part of Southampton, just beyond this eastern portal, up through the park, presuming it does exist and it wasn't filled in, really is one of the most important relics for the city of Southampton. We're now about 100 yards south of the railway tunnel, and despite being built 50 years on, this diagram shows the proximity of the two tunnels. So for obvious reasons, a canal tunnel had to be completely flat. It held water, but a railway tunnel doesn't. And the railway tunnel that was built 50 years later here cleared the canal tunnel at a slight gradient by just 1 foot. Now, it was documented that when they built the railway tunnel, they dug into the canal tunnel below and filled in a lot of the spoil in that tunnel. Everything I've just told you is completely documented evidence, but what remains of the canal tunnel today? Has anyone been inside it? To learn a little bit more about that, we need to head back over to the western portal. Prior to the BBC buildings being here, there was a school called King Edward IV School. Now, in 1920 and 1975, they experienced some significant subsidence by the building, the second of which caused a city engineer to get involved. The city engineer and his team dug a couple of shafts here to do some investigative work and find out why the old canal tunnel was collapsing. They managed to get inside the actual canal. So they found the quality of the bricks did indeed vary hugely. They also found the width of the tunnel varied within just 60 metres. So everything they found out concurred with John Rennie's damning report at the time. But they also found out that the trees here, the roots had gone 7.5 metres down and found their way into the old canal tunnel. They filled this section in right under the BBC, but apparently that didn't completely solve the issue. And of course, in early 2010, Network Rail lowered the line in the tunnel to fit larger containers through. Presumably they must have either encountered or considered the canal tunnel below it. We would love to know more, but didn't have the time to ask. So perhaps there was more resources or unlimited cash at the time. We may still find now the Southampton to Salisbury Canal would still be here today, including the tunnel under Southampton to get to the eastern side. So there is one significant gap in today's archaeological understanding of this tunnel, and that was to understand if both ends actually met. Itself varied in just 60 metres by